but going to call Dennis O'Rourke.
Chairman, I want to talk about two things in relation to this new part of the bill. First of all, supply, and secondly, affordability, because those are, in fact, the crucial issues. So first of all, supply, and that means actually the rate of new house building. Now, Labor and the Greens say 10,000 houses per annum. The government, per Alfred Naro, seems to be saying 14,600 per annum, because he talked about 40 houses a day, and if you multiply that by 365 days, you get 14,300. And in fact, the government's getting nowhere near that rate of building. Nevertheless, that's what he claimed for some reason. But neither of these are actually enough. And if you look at the Auckland Unitary Plan and other indicators actually, the real need in Auckland over the next 7 years is a minimum of 130,000 houses if immigration is going to continue at a net gain of 70,000 people a year. 70,000 people a year. Now, if that was curbed, then maybe that need could be reduced. But the fact is, with that magnitude of net immigration, the need in Auckland alone over 7 years is 130,000 houses. Now, that is why New Zealand First has, for the last year or more, had in its housing policy a target of 140,000 houses over the next 7 years. So we took notice of all those indicators and we put in our policy 140,000 houses over 7 years, which is 20,000 houses a year. So that's not just political one-upmanship. It is actually based on research and actual need as indicated by independent parties. It's not an invention by New Zealand First. It is what the actual need is if immigration is going to continue at the current rate. And yet, if you were to believe Alfred Naro, the government wants to build 14,600 a year, which actually is 102,600 houses over 7 years. And yet his own minister, the Minister of Homelessness, said that was unaffordable, unachievable. He said that all of the parties on this side of the House had unachievable targets. And yet Alfred Naro actually says it should be even more than that. So this government is in total disarray. They don't actually have a target in their so-called comprehensive housing plan. We don't really know what they're trying to do. All we know is they're doing some haphazard things, and what it's amounted to is, as I've said in the past, a litany of failed policies and no comprehensive housing plan whatsoever. And in fact, all it's been doing with the special housing areas is to build a pathetically small number of houses, 1,300 over the last 3 years, which is nowhere near the need. Now, the point, however, Mr. Chairman, is that whatever the target is, there is a genuine need out there, and it is not ever going to be met through RMA reform. It's not ever going to be met through special housing areas and accords with local government, while the reliance on building the houses themselves is left totally in the hands of private developers. Now, Megan Woods in her speech says it is the Labor Party which has the plan. Well, actually, it's not just the Labor Party. New Zealand First for the last 3 or more years has had that sort of plan for government intervention in the market to actually build houses, to develop and build houses and sell them at appropriate houses, affordable houses, modest houses that people can afford as their first home and on terms that people can actually afford. We have always said that, Mr. Chairman. We've always known that direct investment is the only way that this housing by the government, direct investment by the government is the only way that this housing crisis can be solved. The private market alone will never do it, and that is what this government doesn't seem to understand. Now, Mr. Chairman, I want to move on to affordability, because that's, Mr. Chairman,